Hello, my name is Dr. Rodel Aguas. First of all, I hope and pray that all of you are well, safe in your own homes during this pandemic that has hit us hard in this point of our history. Some of my students, even before this pandemic, have been asking me if I had a YouTube channel. Finally, I decided to create one after the closing of the schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is to continue to teach and get in touch with my students until schools open again. I chose to name this series of discussions as Coronavirus and the American Government. I thought this might interest you on how we can analyze and apply fundamental concepts and principles of government to current issues that are impacting our lives. One of these issues is coronavirus or COVID-19. Our discussion today is about COVID-19 and freedom of speech. It has been suggested that worse than the spread of coronavirus is spreading wrong or fake information about this pathogen. With the rise of social media and communication technology, information, either fake or real, spreads quicker than the virus. People claim the right of free speech and of press as their right or even excuse to spread their opinions and information about COVID-19. But the question is, how far should freedom of speech and freedom of press be used in dangerous times such as a global pandemic that has killed thousands of people all over the world? Should freedom of speech be limited in times like this? A time of global pandemic. First, let us make things clear about the principle of freedom of speech, which includes freedom of press. These freedoms are protected in the United States Constitution, which reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Freedom of speech and of press can better be understood by knowing what it is not, or by knowing what rights are not included. For example, freedom of speech does not include the right to incite actions that would harm others. Example, shouting fire in a crowded theater, Schenck v. United States, 1919. Freedom of speech does not include the right to make or distribute obscene materials, Roth v. United States, 1957. Freedom of speech does not include the right to burn draft cards as an anti-war protest, United States v. O'Brien, 1968. Freedom of speech does not include the right to permit students to print articles in a school paper over the objections of the school administration, Hazelwood School District v. Carl Mayer, 1988. Freedom of speech does not include the right of students to make an obscene speech at a school-sponsored event, Bethel School District v. Fraser, 1986. And freedom of speech does not include the right of students to advocate illegal drug use at a school-sponsored event, Morse v. Frederick, 2007. What then are the limits of freedom of speech in a pandemic such as COVID-19? In 1918, the Allied forces composed of the United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and other countries in Europe, that was during World War I, censored the media in spreading any information concerning the influenza or flu pandemic that infected 500 million people. This censorship was intended to prevent the demoralization of their troops fighting in the war. Spain, on the other hand, was a neutral country during the war. It did not censor the media, which published gory details of the influenza pandemic that has also hit their country. Because of this, the Allies began to maliciously refer to this influenza as Spanish flu, though this virus did not originate in Spain. Labeling a virus from the point of origin has since then become a practice. In the early stage of the pandemic in the United States, President Donald Trump repeatedly referred to coronavirus as Chinese virus, which has ignited criticisms from the press. When asked by a reporter why he keeps referring to coronavirus as Chinese virus, he simply replied, because it came from China. He, however, later on refrained from calling it Chinese virus. Perhaps he read my post on Twitter. Mr. Trump might be invoking freedom of speech to justify himself labeling COVID-19 as Chinese virus. If he is, then he is mistaken. Why? Freedom of speech is based on the harm principle, which holds that the actions of individuals should only be limited to prevent harm to other individuals. Freedom of speech and all freedom rights therefore can be limited to prevent harm to other individuals. I repeat, to prevent harm to other individuals. This was expounded by John Stuart Mill in his essay on liberty. He wrote, "The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others." According to the World Health Organization, associating diseases to certain groups of people may lead to xenophobia, that is, prejudice or hatred to certain groups of people or race. Therefore, if Mr. Trump justifies his labeling of the coronavirus as Chinese virus as exercising his freedom of speech under the First Amendment, then, including those who support him in calling it Chinese virus, they are mistaken. Based on the harm principle, labeling coronavirus as Chinese virus is tantamount to promoting or causing harm to others. Even the World Health Organization has warned that this practice of associating diseases to certain groups of people is wrong, as this will result to xenophobia. The virus has already a technical name, COVID-19. So why call it Chinese virus? Unless this is malicious, as the Allied forces did with the Spanish flu. Freedom of speech, therefore, is not a license to harm others. Freedom of speech is not a license to promote discrimination. Freedom of speech is not a license to hide the truth from people. Let me end with this anonymous quote on freedom of speech. Perhaps there should be limits to freedom of speech and of the press. Language that hurts other people is really not much different from physical assault that hurts other people. In both cases, there is an actor, an act, and a victim. There should be no presumption that physical injury necessarily hurts more than mental injury. In principle, people should not be allowed to arbitrarily hurt others. Therefore, Mr. President, stop calling it Chinese virus. It has a name, COVID-19. Now is not the time to stigmatize Asian Americans, We need to be united more than ever in fighting COVID-19 instead of fighting each other. For your reflection, answer the following questions. What does freedom of speech mean under the harm principle of John Stuart Mill? Is President Trump practicing freedom of speech correctly by calling the coronavirus as Chinese virus? Why? Why not? Discuss your reason based on the principle of freedom of speech and on the effects of associating diseases with certain groups of people. Cite at least 2 questions you have about our lesson today. And what important part of the lesson would you like to share with your family? Why would you like to share it with them? You may email your answers at rsaguas@bcps.k12.nd.us. God bless and keep you safe and your families. Till we meet again, I love you all.